Max Headroom Signal Hijack, Chicago, 1987. The first interruption did not feel like history. It felt like a mistake. Something temporary. Something that would be corrected within seconds, like static snapping back into order or a broadcast engineer flipping a switch. It happened on the evening of November 22, 1987, in Chicago, Illinois, where television was still physically present in homes. Not just content, but a kind of shared atmospheric structure. When it changed, the room itself felt different. The signal belonged to WGN-TV, a major local station. Viewers were watching a sports broadcast. A familiar rhythm of commentary, camera cuts, studio lighting, the steady reassurance of something professionally controlled. And then, without warning, the image broke. Not into silence, into motion. But wrong motion. The screen filled with a figure wearing a distorted rubber mask, jerking in front of a flickering background of geometric patterns and darkness. The lighting was unstable. The camera angle was unstable. The entire image felt like it had been assembled in real time, by something that did not fully understand how television was supposed to behave. The interruption lasted only seconds before engineers regained control of the broadcast. The sports program returned. The commentators continued speaking as if nothing had happened. But something had happened, and it had been recorded, because this was not a private moment. It was a live signal intrusion, transmitted into thousands of homes simultaneously. At first, viewers assumed it was a technical glitch, a prank, a malfunction in transmission equipment, something explainable within the boundaries of broadcast technology in 1987. But then it happened again. Later that same night, during a broadcast on WTTW, a PBS station in Chicago, the signal was interrupted a second time. This time, it lasted longer. The image stabilized enough to reveal a figure standing in front of a moving, warped background of darkness and industrial texture. The mask resembled Max Headroom, a synthetic television character, but this version was not controlled, polished, or scripted. It was erratic, laughing, jerking, speaking in fragmented sentences that did not always resolve into coherent meaning. And behind him, there was no studio. Only movement and noise that suggested a physical space hidden behind the broadcast layer itself. The transmission was not authorized. It was not scheduled. And it was not supposed to be possible. The broadcast intrusion lasted approximately 90 seconds before engineers forcibly cut the signal. But in that time, something important happened. It established intent. Because this was not accidental interference. It was controlled interruption. And control implies agency. The second hijack began with silence, a black screen, then a shifting hum of static. Then the masked figure reappeared, closer now, as if the camera had moved forward without permission. The lighting was harsh, flickering between near darkness and overexposure. The audio was distorted, layered with mechanical buzz, and environmental noise that sounded like wind passing through metal corridors. Then the voice began. It was not smooth. It stuttered in rhythm, echoing the artificial speech patterns of the Max Headroom character, but exaggerated to the point of instability. Fragments of phrases appeared, statements broken by laughter, words that seemed to reference broadcast systems themselves, television networks, and control structures, but never fully completed. The effect was not clarity, it was disruption. And beneath that disruption was something more unsettling, familiarity, because whoever was speaking understood the language of television, not just the content, but the structure, the timing, the framing, a rhythm of interruption. At one point, the figure leaned forward and delivered a line. That has since become one of the most repeated fragments from the incident, a reference to the greatest world newspaper nerds, delivered in a mocking cadence that suggested either improvisation or deliberate absurdity. The phrase made no clear sense in context, but it reinforced something important. This was not random noise, it was performance. A performance inside a system that was not designed to be broken live. And yet, it was being broken. At WGN-TV, engineers working in real time attempted to override the signal. But the intrusion was not simply replacing video input. It was hijacking the transmission path itself. The station could not immediately isolate the source, because the signal was not behaving like a standard external feed. It behaved like something inserted directly into the broadcast chain. At WT2W, during the second intrusion, the situation escalated further. The masked figure appeared seated at one point, then standing, then shifting positions in a way that suggested multiple camera sources or rapid editing, but none of it matched known production infrastructure. Behind him, a rotating industrial fan and warped lighting suggested a physical environment, but no location was ever identified. Then came the final segment of the broadcast. The figure began throwing objects off screen. A can was visible briefly. Then laughter intensified. Then the screen cut into chaotic motion, as if multiple people were present, but not fully visible. And then, abruptly, the signal ended. Not faded, not transitioned, just stopped. As if the intrusion had reached a limit it could not pass. For a few seconds afterward, the station remained in confusion. Control room staff attempted to verify whether the signal had originated internally or externally. Emergency protocols were activated. Transmission logs were reviewed. And a disturbing conclusion began to form almost immediately. The hijack had not come from inside the station, but it also had not been traced to a conventional external broadcast source. It had been injected into the signal path at a point that should have required physical proximity to transmission infrastructure, which meant someone had to be close, very close, within range of broadcast hardware. No unauthorized personnel were found. No equipment was recovered. No vehicle, no transmitter, no confirmed origin point. Only the broadcast itself remained, recorded by viewers, preserved on tape, and replayed endlessly in the years that followed. In the days after the incident, the story spread rapidly through television engineering circles and local media, not because of its content alone, but because of its implications. Television signals in 1987 were not easily intercepted without significant equipment. To override them in real time required either access to transmission towers or a highly localized and powerful broadcast source, which meant the perpetrators were either inside the system or physically near it. Neither possibility was comforting. Investigators from the Federal Communications Commission began reviewing the incident. Engineers attempted to triangulate signal interference patterns. Police reviewed station security logs, but nothing definitive emerged. There were no confirmed sightings of the individuals responsible, only speculation based on technical constraints and fragmentary visual evidence. The mask itself became an object of fascination. It resembled Max Headroom, a synthetic television personality, but the hijacker's version was distorted, handmade, unstable. A broadcast that looked digital in concept, but physical in execution. A performance that mimicked media language, but resisted media control. And that contradiction became the center of the mystery, because it suggested intent that understood television deeply enough to exploit it, but not in a way that aligned with institutional production. In the months that followed, theories multiplied. Some suggested disgruntled media technicians. Others suggested performance artists testing broadcast boundaries. Some suggested early forms of signal piracy experimentation. But none of these explanations accounted for the precision of timing or the ability to penetrate multiple stations in a single night. Even more unsettling was the lack of follow-up. No re-emergence of the signal, just silence, as if the intrusion had been a single completed action. In later years, the Max Headroom hijack became one of the most analyzed broadcast anomalies in modern media history. Engineers dissected the footage frame by frame. Linguists studied the speech fragments. Security experts attempted to reconstruct possible transmission methods. But every analysis eventually returned to the same limitation. There was not enough information to identify origin, only behavior. And the behavior was deliberate disruption of a live system, not destruction, not replacement, interruption, which is a different kind of statement entirely. Because interruption implies awareness of flow, it implies understanding of structure, and it implies the decision to break it at a precise moment when it matters most. That is what continues to unsettle those who study the incident, not the mask, not the voice, not even the chaos of the broadcast itself, but the fact that it knew exactly when to appear and exactly when to stop. In retrospect, what happened in Chicago that night is often described as one of the earliest examples of broadcast signal intrusion. But that framing feels incomplete to those who have watched the footage closely. Because it was not just intrusion, it was presence. A moment where television stopped being a controlled window and briefly became something that could be entered from the outside without permission, without identity, and without explanation. And even now, decades later, when the footage is replayed, there is still a strange effect that remains difficult to articulate. The sense that the interruption is not fully over, just paused, waiting for the next signal break to continue.